In the shallow, turquoise, clear waters of Grand Cayman's North Sound, dozens of wild southern stingrays glide effortlessly through the sea.
These southern rays are very, very important to the Cayman Islands from an ecotourism perspective.
Tourists from all over the world come to the site to interact with the animals.
You don't get that kind of experience anywhere else in the world.
It's the #1 water sports attraction on the island.
It's 100-foot viz, it's generally calm, and the animals are very conditioned.
Thousands of people each year visit the iconic stingrays of Grand Cayman, and for more than a decade, researchers have been studying the animals. Among other things, they want to find out what impact human interaction might have on the fish.
From boat fuel, sunscreen, people eliminating in the water, all of the different types of things that they're exposed to at the sandbar in really high concentrations could certainly be very detrimental to them long term, because the numbers of people that are visiting the sandbar just grow and grow every year.
The animals have a wretched time when there's too many people there. They become very flighty, they keep moving all the time. They stay on the perimeter of the sandbar and don't interact. So it's a double-edged sword. How much is too much?
This is our national treasure. Why not enjoy it, but don't abuse it.
Our concern is, first and foremost, the welfare of the rays. Secondarily, obviously very importantly, the experience of visitors to our islands. And we probably have 1 million people a year who visit the stingray. So it's clearly something extremely important to us, but it's equally important that we get the balance right.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Batchelor Foundation, encouraging people to preserve and protect America's underwater resources, and by Divers Direct Emotion Club, inspiring the pursuit of tropical adventures and scuba diving, and by the Do Unto Others Trust.
The Cayman Islands are a popular travel destination in the Western Caribbean. Grand Cayman, the largest of the country's 3 islands, is famous the world over as a major banking center and for its beautiful beaches and marine environment. And for the last 30 years or so, the island has also become known for its tame stingrays that congregate in the shallow waters of the North Sound.
Fishermen would come inside to the area because it was shallow. They could clean their catch. The stingrays started to catch on and would aggregate there to feed on the discarded fish parts that were thrown over the side. And then people decided that the rays were friendly and close enough that they could feed them. And then it took off as a phenomenon.
Normally, wild stingrays are solitary animals that are very skittish of people and can rarely be approached closely. During the daytime, they're often found buried in the sand, hiding from predators such as sharks. But at the Stingray Sandbar, also sometimes referred to as Stingray City, after a nearby site where scuba divers can interact with the animals, the fish actively engage with visitors, making the area one of the most popular tourist attractions on Grand Cayman.
This is one of our main business right here on this island, especially for tourism. A lot of the local guys does it, and when it's busy, the companies make money. As long as my customers are happy, I'm happy.
Renowned marine life artist and scientist Guy Harvey moved to Grand Cayman in 1999.
I was interested in the turnover of animals, their sight fidelity, the sex ratio, what do they do at night time? All these questions nobody could answer. Nobody had any clue how many animals were there.
It's really important to do this kind of research on the sandbar because human interaction has changed the dynamics of the stingrays so drastically.
In 2002, Guy began a research project in collaboration with the Cayman Islands Department of Environment to learn more about the iconic rays.
We started a 2-year population study using 2 research students along with a supervisor from the Guy Harvey Research Institute based at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. And during that time they tagged 180 animals from the sandbar and 20 others from around the island as control animals. So that was our benchmark, and the important thing was to get every animal tagged with a non-invasive pit tag.
These pit tags are similar to a pet's microchip, and they allow the experts to identify individual animals when they're recaptured.
18261.
We found that we had 100% retention of these tags. Many of the large animals that are there at the sandbar today were tagged back in 2002. So that gives us a fantastic chronology of their life history.
During the first 2 years of the study, researchers monitored the animals monthly to gather detailed information.
We also did some sonic tracking at night time to determine where they went, because we realized that their behavior had changed completely. They're typically nocturnal predators and will lay low in the daytime, but now they're feeding in the daytime and they were laying low at night, especially the large females. And they would go and sit within a quarter of a mile of the sandbar. The males, we found, on the other hand, because they were outcompeted because they're smaller, would forage at night and actually cover 2 or 3 miles in a night before coming back to the sandbar. We found that the 2 sexes had completely different behavior.
In southern stingrays, as in many other fishes, the females are larger than the males.
Having larger females gives you a reproductive advantage over everybody else, because the bigger you are, the more pups you can have.
Guy and his research team continued the summer counts of the animals over the years.
The research is critical. There's obviously an ongoing need to monitor these populations.
When there was a sudden decline in the number of stingrays at the site, the researchers and tour operators became concerned.
We first realized the decline in the population late in 2010 through casual observation alone, and by 2011 we got concerned, and 2012 we took our first January census, and in response to everybody's request.
And found that compared to our 2002, 2003 and 2008 numbers, they had dropped significantly. And from over 100 to 61 in January 2012 and 57 in July 2012. Very drastic decrease, but we had no idea why that would be the case. Could it be sharks that were taking them more often now? Was it something to do with their health? Has the diet that we've been giving them taken a toll finally? Any kind of stress or disease?
There you go. Very tense.
To find answers to these questions, experts from the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta joined the research team from the Guy Harvey Ocean Foundation and the Department of Environment in 2012. They're conducting health assessments on the stingrays to understand what may have led to the decline in numbers and what impact the human interaction is having on the animals.
Well, I'm the stingray catcher, so my job is to continually bring rays so that we keep the production line going as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that took many years of practice. I've had various help from tour boat operators to friends who were very skilled in the art of catching a ray. Young ones are sometimes extremely difficult to catch because they're flighty, they escape easily from your hand, and you don't want to end up putting too much pressure on them. The larger ones are easier to catch but harder to hold because they're basically like a massive pizza, and they're very powerful animals, so one flap and they could be out of your hands.
Once securely on board the boat, the venomous barb on the stingray's tail is covered as a safety precaution.
The barb, of course, is a very important defensive mechanism for these animals, and you have to respect that.
Next, the animals are scanned to see if they've been tagged in the past.
553.
After the animal is identified, basic measurements are taken to look at their growth. Then a vet takes blood samples from the vein that runs along the bottom of the tail.
We look at many things, such as complete blood counts, looking at the red cells, looking at the white blood cell counts. We look at their proteins. Then we'll look at a general chemistry. We look at their stress hormones. And then we're also looking at vitamins, minerals, other nutrients, fatty acids. So it's very similar to whether we took our dog or our cat to the doctor's office, had a blood sample taken, and doing a complete health panel. The animals that are on the sandbar definitely appear relatively healthy. When we look at their blood parameters and compare that to the very little bit of data that is out there on free-ranging southern rays along the Atlantic coast, and then we look at that in comparison to aquarium animals, they are very comparable with most things. In general, we feel like those animals are doing fairly well.
Experts also take a small tissue sample from one of the fins.
We take it from the same place every time, and that helps us identify that particular animal in terms of whether she has actually been looked at on this particular assessment.
The tissue will eventually grow back. Both tissue and blood samples are also used to study the nutritional health of the stingrays.
In the wild, these animals would be solitary, and they are bottom feeders. They'd be eating things like clams and bivalves, crustaceans. They may come across dead carcasses, so they would have a varied diet in the wild. Here at the site, they're actually being hand-fed a non-native food item, squid, and squid is fairly nutritionally poor to begin with, so that could be related to why we're seeing some of the population level changes here at the sandbar. Also, a free-ranging stingray can travel miles and miles a day to actually find food. These animals are relatively stationary because they know they will get access to food relatively easily day after day. We're looking at vitamins and trace minerals in their blood, and that's sort of a gross indicator of their nutritional status. And then we're looking at some more fine-scale markers. We're looking at fatty acids, and we're also looking at stable isotopes. Both of those markers are based on the fact that you are what you eat. We can actually look at those markers to track over time what these animals have been eating. Some of the preliminary data that we're seeing is that the fatty acid profile of these animals is very similar to squid, which makes sense because that's primarily what they're being fed. And that's telling us that their dietary history is not ideal for them and could potentially down the road present some problems for these animals. All the animals here are getting enough food, but are they getting the right kinds of food? So if we liken it from a human perspective, we could ask, are these guys couch potatoes? Are they eating too many potato chips?
Evidence shows the stingrays at the sandbar do forage for food, in addition to being fed by people. But just how much might differ between the sexes. To get a more fine-scaled picture of these dietary differences, Lisa examined 10 males and 10 females on a quarterly basis in 2014.
Females are a little bit pushier animals, so the males tend to be on the fringes. Based on some of the tracking data that has been done by our colleagues, we know that the females tend to stay put, the males tend to range a little bit more. So I suspect the reason that they're ranging is because they might be feeding on other things because they cannot get access due to the competition by the females out at the sandbar. So if that is true, we should be able to see that in the stable isotope and in the fatty acid data.
The scientists also hope that 2014's quarterly survey will give them a better understanding of the animal's reproductive cycle.
This, of course, has particular relevance to the sustainability of the whole experience.
Dr. Alexa McDermott conducts an ultrasound on each female that comes on board. Unlike most fish, stingrays give birth to live pups.
First, I look at the uterus, usually because it's the easiest, most prominent thing to find, especially if the animal is pregnant. And with the ultrasound, you can see the uterine wall, and you can see little finger-like projections inside the uterus on some of the animals if they're pregnant, and those secrete nutrients for the developing pups. So this is an image of a pup inside the uterus. So the uterus will be here, and then the pup is here. This is the body of the pup, and here is a wing and a wing. So it's as if the pup is swimming at you on the screen, and you can even see the individual little cartilage rays in the wings. And then I also look at the ovaries, so I look to see how many they have, if they're all the same color, if they're all the same size, if there are cysts present or not present. And so I'm looking to see if that changes with pregnancy, seeing if that changes over time for individuals, and just kind of documenting it because it hasn't really been done before in this species.
At each of the quarterly health assessments in 2014, a little more than 1/3 of the females were pregnant, leading the scientists to believe that there is no specific breeding season for this population of stingrays. As the sandbar grew in popularity over the years, the increasing number of tourists at the site became a source of concern.
The animals on a heavy cruise ship, they are harassed. You can see that they're uncomfortable because they fly around the place. They're moving very quickly and they're not stopping.
In 2007, rules were introduced to better regulate the interactions between rays and people.
There's 3 types of limits. There's a limit to the amount of people you can have on the boat, and that's restricted to 100 people. Then there's a limit to the amount of boats that can be in there at any one time. So the limit is 20 commercial boats for an hour or so. But obviously, if you've got 20 boats with 100 people on, that gives a theoretical limit of 2,000 people. But there's an actual person limit of 1,500 commercial passengers. So that just accounts for the fact that most of the boats can't carry 100 people.
The sandbar became what is known as a Wildlife Interaction Zone, or WIZ, and stingrays were protected inside this area.
You are allowed to hold them, you're allowed to feed them, but you're not allowed to lift them out of the water. There was also an issue with what people were feeding them, so we introduced conditions that restricted the feeding to ballyhoo and squid.
And you're not allowed to wear shoes in the water, you're not allowed to fish or take any wildlife out of the WIZ zone. You aren't allowed to harm the rays in any way.
It was a very difficult job to balance the private interests versus the commercial versus the tourism product, and above all that, the environmental concerns. So yeah, we worked for close to 5 years consulting with the stakeholders. I think it's the best compromise that could be expected under the situation. I do think that it does work well. There are definitely still days when the timing is off and you get the full quota, the 20 boats with a lot of people, and the sense then is that it's very, very crowded, and I don't think people enjoy that. But on a typical day with 1 to 2 ships, it's not so stressful. The sandbar, yeah, there are things that we would like to change, but respecting all of the stakeholders and the compromise that we're at, I think, yeah, the balance is pretty good.
While the rays now had protection inside the Wildlife Interaction Zone, no laws prohibited the taking of rays elsewhere around the island.
The WIZ zone isn't large enough from a typical territory of a stingray. So once a stingray traveled outside of the WIZ zone, it was theoretically possible that you could capture that ray, and there was no law saying what you did with it. You could eat the ray, you could put it in a tank, which is actually what happened. We had a local establishment that had about 10 rays that it put into a tank and had them on display with other creatures that it had there.
They said they came from fishermen. They were caught by hook and line and would have died anyway.
But one thing that was very noticeable about the rays that were in the tank is that they were not freaked out by humans and that you could hand feed them, which everybody immediately assumed these rays had come from the sandbar. So there was a big hue and cry about the fact that, you know, people were taking rays from the sandbar.
So we investigated the situation and found that out of the 10 rays that they had, a couple of them had been tagged from our research efforts. And from our research, we know that stingrays around the sandbar show a strong site fidelity to the area. And so the likelihood that they would have come from Stingray City was quite high. But you can't prove that because some will forage elsewhere if they haven't been fed enough for the day, and they're not protected outside the Wiz Zone.
And that actually heightened the awareness of, wow, we think that the numbers of the animals on the sandbar have been declining, and might this be another reason why they're declining? Are people actually fishing for them? Are they being taken to other locations? I think that was definitely an eye-opener, if you will, for Department of Environment, for the ecotourism industry down here, that more protection was needed.
In the press it became quite a heated item because the owner and operator of the Dolphin Discovery didn't want to let go of the animals. And the DOE made them put back the tagged ones, but they held on to the 6 untagged ones. And we were pushing to get them protected because theoretically anybody could take a stingray and fling it on their barbecue, because people do eat them, or put them in their own pool, or put them in their bathtub and do whatever they want, and there was nothing to protect the stingrays. And why would you want this to happen if these animals are worth so much money? So I took a, back of an envelope calculation. I said, 60 rays, at the time there were only 60 rays, 500,000 people paying $40 a head. Each animal generates $500,000 a year. They're long-lived, slow-growing animals, so in 20 years an animal theoretically can generate $10 million for this country. Why wouldn't you protect them? Until we put it into dollars and cents, that finally the penny dropped with the politicians and something got done about it. And the next Minister of the Environment, he gets it, said, you put those stingrays back in the ocean where they belong. And there was, a big palaver about that, and they got released. And I'm glad to say many of those same animals are still at the sandbar. So they've become acclimatized to their new location and are doing fine.
In May 2013, a law was put in place that protected southern stingrays and 2 other species in the Cayman Islands.
You could no longer have a ray in captivity, you could no longer take one from the wild. So that was the reason that was introduced. Again, not really to protect rays because they were threatened as a species, but the sandbar rays were threatened by entrepreneurs that wanted to kind of exploit the fact that these rays were already conditioned to being hand-fed. So the majority of the rays in captivity were male, and subsequently there was a very big fall off in the number of males at the sandbar, and this was actually quite a serious issue because there was already this very large imbalance between male and female.
There are currently 7 females to 1 male, and so removing animals, especially males, from the population could have a drastic effect.
But since the return of the captive animals to the sandbar, the population has rebounded.
The population has definitely rebounded for reasons we still don't fully understand, and this is why the blood work coming in from the Georgia Aquarium folks is so valuable. We can get a better handle on their reproductive rate, body analysis and all that.
We're not seeing the numbers necessarily that we would have seen in 2008, but they have certainly increased from 2012, which is very positive.
But despite the rules and new protections, some in the community still feel there are too many boats at the site.
You cannot give the people what they're paying for when there's 800 or 1,000 people out here. I want them to have good memories of what this is all about. It's not just to enjoy themselves, but it be educational and to respect the environment. I'm very emotional when I see a stingray get hurt. I literally want to cry because they're part of my life. This is a big honor for Cayman, and this is one of our national gifts, and we should respect it and not abuse it. They put less boats out here. A lot of the boats, I feel, is overloaded.
On the major cruise ship days, you can get up to 5 or 6 ships in dock, so it does become very busy indeed.
Those animals may see 5,000 people in a day during the busy season. That's an awful lot of human interaction.
My recommendation is that there be no more than 300 or 400 people at the sandbar at any given time. And how you control that from a government perspective is up to them. Our job is to provide the data, the science on what is happening out there and give it to the policy makers to make a decision.
It can be a difficult balance to strike. But I think we should nonetheless make every effort to get the balance right. And it has high economic value for us. But if we aren't good stewards, and if the welfare of the rays are not our primary focus, and somehow we do something to lose that, then we've lost the battle and we've lost everything. So we need to really err on the side of caution and try to make sure from a conservation perspective that we get things right.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Batchelor Foundation, encouraging people to preserve and protect America's underwater resources, and by Divers Direct, Emotion Club, inspiring the pursuit of tropical adventures and scuba diving, and by the Do Unto Others Trust.